Hello YouTube, and welcome to Underneath the Hat. So my personal assistant, who is also my sister, informed me that in order for you all to get to know me better, I need to start doing story times. So we were sitting at a table yesterday coming up with different concepts that I can talk about. And the one thing that I thought of was the R. Kelly docu-series on Lifetime called Surviving R. Kelly. Now I know most of you have seen it already, and I just wanted to give my perspective of it. This is my personal experience and how I feel it relates to the issues that were brought up in his docu-series. So the name of this film will be, or this story will be, The R. Kelly Spectrum. Now, I am a educator and CPS, and being an educator for 14 years, I have seen various students, hundreds of thousands of students over 14 years. And when you have someone who is acting a certain way, conducting themselves a certain way, either mentally, academically, behaviorally, they are put on a spectrum. So a spectrum is like a number line, and it basically tells you where on that line or spectrum that person fits. So while watching the Surviving R. Kelly docuseries, I realized after the third night, when I was sitting on my couch in tears, that I was in a relationship that was on the R. Kelly spectrum. What do you mean by that? That means that in my first marriage, I was in an emotional and mentally abusive relationship. I was psychologically manipulated into doing things and accepting things that if I had been in my right mind, I would not have accepted. And I realized that even though he wasn't on the same level as R. Kelly, he was on the spectrum. Let me tell you why. I met my first husband when I was 16, actually 14 years old in high school. And we got together when I was 16. And during that time, I was having issues at home. My mother and father had divorced. I had a stepfather who wasn't the best person. And so I was looking for something or someone to rescue me. And in came this knight in shining armor. He showered me with gifts. He took me places. He exposed me to things that I had never seen before. And it was a way for me to escape the things that I was going through at home, even before a few hours, whether it was in person in high school or over the phone. And so eventually we ended up living together and getting married at the age of 23. So from 16 to 23, we were together. I got married when I was 23. We ended up staying married for 9 years. And in between those 16 years of being with this man, I endured some very traumatic experiences. Now, the thing with R. Kelly, allegedly, as far as the sexual things, didn't have to deal with that. But I was more on the lines of his wife, and that she was kept away from a lot of the things that were going on. And people may think, well, how are you married and you not know what's going on? Well, when you are psychologically manipulated and people feed off of the things that they know you're going through, they can pretty much get you to do anything. And I had to sit back and realize that I have been in that type of relationship. I had been in that type of relationship. And I sat there in tears, listening to these women's stories and realizing you went through the same thing and had no idea that it was on this level or on this spectrum. I have, after looking back and writing my book Underneath the Hat, that's the cover back there, which you can find on Amazon or any website where books are sold. And after writing my book, I realized that once I took the rose-colored glasses off, there were so many things that were going on around me that I wasn't paying attention to. I can admit that I was very naive. I was 16 when he met me. I had other things going on in my life, and all I saw was a guy who was buying me things and taking me places, and it was an escape from what I was going through at home. And so once I got into it, it was like I can't see anything else. And that's exactly how he wanted it. My relationship with my family was already rocky, and so having the thought that he was the only one who cared for me, it was easy for me to pull myself even further away from them. And I ultimately became only his. I had no friends that I could talk to. I had no family members that I could talk to. It was all about him. What would he think? What would he say? Would he like my hair? Him buying me clothes, me wearing what he wanted me to wear. Hence the underneath the hat is a play on words because I was a first lady of a church. So he was and still is a pastor. And there were a lot of things going on with me before he became pastor and while he was pastor that I hid underneath my hat and allowed to happen because I was oblivious to what was going on until something happened. And so being with him for all those years, I would cater to his every word. Now, I wasn't the most domestic person. Now, we didn't starve, but I wasn't one to go in the kitchen and cook and clean every day, all day. And some people may say, well, that's why he cheated. Well, that's no excuse. But I ultimately found out that not only was he on the R. Kelly spectrum because of the psychological manipulation of playing on the weakness and the issues that I deal with at home, but he also had his own personal harem of women that I knew nothing about. And all of these women were inside the church. Once you all pick up my book, Underneath the Hat, it goes into deep detail about Amanda, Jane, and Campbell and the things that she went through and all of the things that were revealed in her relationship. But in my relationship, I realized that there were so many things going on around me and people were afraid to say something because they had this mentality of, it ain't my business. And he had it set up to where what goes on in his house stays in his house. So I never dealt with physical abuse. I never dealt with sexual abuse. It was always mental and emotional. Him being gone for 8-9 hours on a weekend. Me making sure everything was done for the church as far as printing up bulletins, making sure that they were ready. I figured he needed the time on the weekend in order to get himself ready for Sunday. Not knowing that the weekend was the day that he would go and see the side chicks that he had and give them their time, their weekly time. But he became so comfortable with what he was doing till he started bringing the women that he was messing with inside of our family. One of them was my god kid's mother. One of them was a parent of students that I taught at my school. And we also happened to be members of another church at the time. One of them was a member of the church. So while I was on the usher board passing her program, not knowing that she had just went to Disney on Ice with my husband and her daughter the weekend before. So I realized that I was in the same relationship and that it had been going on from the very beginning. From when I lived with him my senior year of high school, and I asked him to go out to lunch and he told me he couldn't. And back then pagers were our form of communication. And when I checked his pager, it was a message from one of his members of the church he attended saying she had to cancel their lunch date. And I went straight snap, crackle, pop. But then words were said that smoothed everything over because he was my knight in shining armor. So after separating from him and then finding out that there were all of these things that were going on, and have been going on for years at a time. From one of his mistresses actually having her mother in our wedding, it's in the book, to the guy kid's mother being called his sister, but he's the only child, to him going over to discipline one of the children of one of his mistresses because his father wasn't around. So there were so many stories and so many lies that were being told and created in order to prevent me from knowing what was really going on. But the people around me knew, but just didn't want to say anything. But God has a way of revealing some things. And when it was time for me to know and time for me to remove myself, he literally picked me up and dropped me somewhere else because he knew that I would not leave on my own because I was so manipulated by him. And so watching this docuseries, I was literally, like I said, in tears the last day of the series. The 5th and 6th hour of the series, I was in tears, crying. And I was talking to my husband, my current husband, and I was like, I didn't realize it. And so I felt even more sympathy for those women because I've actually been through it. It wasn't on the same level, but it was on the same spectrum. And I think that we all have to sometimes sit back and realize that we all have something in common with the people that we see on a daily basis. We may not realize it. And people may ask me, well, how did you not realize that before you looked at the docuseries? Because sometimes when you're being mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually abused, you tend to block things out as a defense mechanism. There are things, if you think about it, that you don't remember offhand, but then something you see or hear will trigger it, and that memory will come back. Sometimes we, those who have been abused, we do it as a defense mechanism. Because if we were to carry around and remember every little thing that ever happened to us, whether it was negative or positive, we would be on an overload and wouldn't be able to handle anything else. So God allows for us to be able to use our ability. He sometimes cleans our slate and clears our mind so we're not able to hold on to a lot of garbage. And so I realized that I had stored away so many things that had happened to me. Some which aren't even in this book, but there's some good things in there that I didn't realize. And watching and listening to those women in their docuseries, I realized that I was on the R. Kelly spectrum. And so I wanted this one to be my first story time for Underneath the Hat, because I just want people out there to know that we all have gone through something. It may not have been on the same level as those women. It may not have been on the same level as the people that you see every day. But I just want us all to be more empathetic and sympathetic to the things that people go through around us. Just because I may not have had that same experience as you doesn't mean that I can't have empathy for you. And if I did go through the same thing as you, then it allows me to be sympathetic. So we all can have empathy for each other, because we all may not have gone through the same things, but we all know how it feels to be hurt. And so after watching this series and realizing that I am on the R. Kelly spectrum, I realized that God has given me this platform of Underneath the Hat to be able to share my testimony and not worry about what other people say, but to know that I'm helping somebody. And so if there's one thing I say that can help somebody and help them to do differently for themselves or for the people around them, then that's what I'm going to do. And so I hope that you all will join me in this mission to help people to come from underneath their hats and to share who they are and not be afraid of the things that they've gone through, because somebody's test And their testimony can ultimately stop somebody else from going through the same thing. I think so often we sit on our information and we sit on our testimony not knowing that we can be the blessing for somebody sitting right next to us if we just open our mouths. And we also have to be mindful of how we say things. I know that I can tell you something negative, but the way that I deliver it to you will be the way that you take it. One person's perception is another person's reality. So we have to be very careful on how we say things, so that everyone can get the help that they need. So, again, I, Sheree Simmons, am a victim of being on the R. Kelly spectrum. And so I want to charge everyone that's watching to think about events in your life that may have happened to you, things that you've gone through that no one else knows about. And reach out to somebody, whether it's someone else you know who's gone through it too, or someone who you know has been hurt in some form or fashion as you've been hurt. And just say hi. Just say I was thinking about you. Just ask them if everything is okay. Because not everybody is willing to share or be as open as you. So I'll be coming back more often, giving my testimony and sharing my thoughts on various things. But I want you to share or subscribe to my web series Underneath the Hat and like it as well so that we can continue these conversations. I'm not here to judge anybody because if you read my book, I really can't judge. But I'm just here to be the vessel that God wants me to be, to share my story to someone else so that someone else will be helped in the process. So again, share, subscribe, comment, so that we can hopefully help someone who may be reading it and help them to make a better decision than we did through our tests and our trials. Check out my book, Underneath the Hat. It's available on Amazon and Kindle and wherever books are sold. And be on the lookout for my upcoming web series. The next episode will be on friendships. Now, we all have some friends, or people who think that they're our friends. I wish I had had better friends who knew what was going on and actually told me. But I know that there are no mistakes made. It was meant for me to not know what all was going on at the moment it was going on, because I would probably be filming this from behind a jail cell. That's in the book too. So I'll see you later. See you soon. And remember, it doesn't hurt just to say hi or ask someone how they're doing. So I'll see you later.